Okay, so today we wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about more in depth into Easy Preps. Easy Preps was a meal prep company that we started back, I believe it was like
2018.
9 months before the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
So was it 2018, 2019? 2018, right?
2018.
That was
Mm-hmm.
in June. Easy Preps was built, I think it started in like March because we went to Oaxaca in January, and we stayed in Oaxaca for a couple weeks. Oaxaca is in Mexico. For those of you that don't know, it's a beautiful state. And we were in Oaxaca, and at this point in our life, we were just traveling and trying to have a good time. And I think once again, it goes back to everything that we've spoken before. We were a bit lost and didn't really know in what direction to head into. And so, after spending 2 weeks in Oaxaca and having an amazing time there, we decided that we were going to go ahead and move to Oaxaca for a year. The goal was a year. And so, when we got back in mid January, I believe, I started figuring out the procedures for us to go ahead and move there. One of the issues that we had was we had the pugs, um, that we were trying to figure out how we were going to get them transported, and pugs are really hard to transport in a plane. They have some respiratory issues, and I think certain
High.
airlines don't allow it
They
or
have a
something.
very high risk of death in
Right,
planes.
and so we're trying to figure that out. We figured out the Airbnb. We had found a home where we could have stayed there for a year, and we could afford it. And the goal was to just freelance. At this time, I was also doing personal training at the garage. And so my goal was to go online and just continue to do that. And obviously, in a touristy place, I would be able to go ahead and work there and make enough to enjoy ourselves in a year. But then one day I decided to wake up and just say, you know what, we should build a meal prep company, and that's how it all started.
And then I said yes.
Yeah. So we blew away the idea of going to Mexico, and at this time, I think I had just started. So I started working for Santa Cruz Pirate Fitness,
Mm-hmm.
and this was February 18th. I think I still remember the day. Um, so February 18th, I started working for Santa Cruz Pirate Fitness. That was in Santa Cruz, and so I would work there, and then I would come home in the evenings and do PTs at home as well. So I was doing it in both places. Um, I think for me at this point in life, I was just looking for change. I think the garage was very repetitive, and I didn't really know if that was something that I wanted to continue to do. And an opportunity came up to me to go work for this gym that is a great gym, and it was a great opportunity for me to continue to learn more. And a big part for me also, I wanted to see if I could realistically lift the gym myself up, right, through by myself. And that was one of my challenges going in there. And I know they needed help with the PT, and they needed help with the group training, and or actually just the PT. And so that's what I did. I went out there. I implemented the systems that I had learned at the corporate. Got that place up and running. Um, put in a recurring system. I think they were doing PIFs at the time, so paid in fulls, which
Mm-hmm.
are basically you buy 8 sessions at a time or 24 sessions at a time. But it's just a very difficult conversation to have with the customer when you're telling them, hey, by the way, it's going to be $3,000 up front. And so the recurring service, which is a monthly service, so instead, if you were to have 24 sessions, we would just break those up into 8 sessions per month. And so now it's a 3 month agreement, and those $2,400 are broken up into 3 months, so the price becomes more manageable. Um, and that's what I went in there and we did. But in this process, what happened was uh, I got caught in traffic, and I started listening to podcasts. And for those of you that are out there, that are in the commuting world and you commute every single day, listening to a podcast or listening to a book is very valuable, because if you're stuck in a job right now that you probably don't like, or you're just tired of it, and you're commuting on a day-to-day basis, let's say you commute an hour there, an hour back, that's 2 hours. If you put those 2 hours to learn, right, and you listen to a podcast, you listen to some educational content during those 2 hours, well, in a week you already listened to 10, right? In a month you listen to 40 to 50 hours. Multiply that times 6 months, all of a sudden that's 300 hours, right? Multiply it in a year, that's 600 hours. You are going to learn something. And so that's exactly what happened to me during that time. I started listening to this podcast, and one of the biggest issues that I had at the time with the clients, and I was getting frustrated at that time, a lot of the excuses that I was getting back then was, I can't figure out the food, I don't know how to cook. And obviously businesses are solutions to problems. And so after listening to these podcasts, I was like, all right, I'm going to create a solution to this problem that I have. We're going to build a meal prep company. And that's where it really all started. It started in March. We started building, I would sit in traffic, I would listen to these podcasts, and then I would text Andrea like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Make sure you buy this, make sure you buy that. And that's how it all started, realistically. I would commute every day. I'd go work at Santa Cruz Power Fitness, selling memberships, doing all that type of stuff. I would come home, listen to the podcast on the way home, brainstorm all these ideas, and then I would come home and we'd get to work, and then we would start just doing things. And it happened just like that. One of the things that I think I enjoy doing is not sitting on ideas. I like to put them out, and then I like to work on them immediately. We can call that impulsive behavior, and it's a double-edged sword, because you try so many things and you fail at most of them, but eventually you run into some really good ideas that actually follow through, and they end up working out. So, now as we're more established, it's hard to put all those ideas and pinpoint them away a little bit, because it could also be a distraction now, right? And so now that we have an understanding of where we're trying to go, now it's like, okay, that idea is great, but it's probably not the right time. But at the beginning, when I didn't have anything, I was just trying everything.
Yeah, it was 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Every day.
And I think that's a big lesson. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the business, how it went, and some of the ideas and some of the lessons that we learned by starting this meal prep company, realistically, which, we got it up and running, I think, up to $30,000 revenue per month, from not ever running any business to never being in the food industry. And it was all delivery. So it was really cool. Once again, we shut it down when the pandemic happened. But it was really cool to see that, hey, we could actually do this. We could generate this amount of revenue in a business. And, I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that was, don't do something that you don't like. The food industry was not us, even though we were trying to solve a problem that we wanted, or that we thought we could fix. We weren't food people. I mean, at least I wasn't. I was a fitness person. And, sometimes the ego gets in front of you and you're like, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. But if you don't have a passion behind it, you're going to half-ass it. You're going to become really frustrated. And when the frustrations comes, that's when the problems really start to hit. And that's one of the things that we found. But I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about what was that like for you starting up. And then I'll go ahead and chime in a little bit.
Well, on my end, I don't have a background of business like you do. I have never worked in corporate. I did serving, so I did have experience in customer service and working with people and in the food industry. But as far as a meal prep company, I knew nothing about it. And definitely my number one lesson, just like you, was don't do something that you're truly not passionate for, because you can only write it out for so long until it's downhill. And unfortunately, that was the scenario for us, right? Our stress was off the roof, our finances were very low, and then the pandemic, then our pregnancy. So everything added up. And if that passion would have been there for us, it would have helped us keep going, but it wasn't. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons. On the other hand, it was also a great learning experience. I think at a very young age that we were, and not knowing really what we were doing. I mean, I had you with all the business knowledge and to be able to guide us, but it is also a really cool experience to see the community that we built and all the people that we served and the demand for it. If we would have had the finances and obviously a better or bigger team, I think that our company would have been very profitable. And also, it was very fun coming up with all the menu items. And I think that was really challenging, but also really fun, and just trying to experiment with food, make it taste good, and then know that people actually enjoyed it and looked forward to it. We had about 3 meals that were our top sellers, and it is really cool to be known as the meal prep company in town, right? And to think of how it started, right? I remember being in my mom's kitchen and just having the full counter laid out of a bunch of different ingredients. I don't know how many grocery store trips I took and how many times I burnt stuff and messed it up, and it was just dry, and I was like, fuck, how am I going to do this? And then you wanted like a million items on the menu. So it was very challenging, very fun as well. And another lesson is definitely know every aspect of the business. And that's something that I shied away from. I've always told myself that I'm not a numbers person because I wasn't the best at math. And no matter what business you have to know your numbers. You have to know the data. You have to know every part of it, because in our case, I was in charge of the menu, I was in charge of the kitchen, and you were in charge of the financial. But if I would have understood the financial portion, I would have understood that every mistake I made in the kitchen was costing us money, right? And it would have been more of an impact. So I think that was the second biggest lesson for me, is know every aspect of the business. And if you don't know, ask questions, and don't just assume that it is something else, right? Because then it becomes a bigger problem, and then in this case, we're losing money. So
Right. There were expensive mistakes for not knowing. What's that saying? What was it? I'm not even gonna say it right. It was something like not knowing is like the most expensive education you can have, or something like that. But basically, like, it's gonna cost you. Mistakes are gonna cost a lot of money, and that's the way you're gonna learn. Unfortunately, sometimes you run out of cash, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
But with the food, because the system, the way it was, right? So we were working out of a commissary kitchen, so we would borrow a space. And so we would get charged for the table, we would get charged for using the oven, we would get charged for using certain spaces and certain appliances, the stove, stuff like that. And we would get charged by the hour, right? So the goal was to be as efficient as possible. But I remember the first day, we didn't have a system, we didn't have procedures. We didn't really know what we were going into. We were super excited to get started. We knew that. And we had a lot of orders that first day too, right? People knew that we were in the fitness space, and they knew that we knew what we were, quote unquote, doing, or at least they believed that we did. And one of the things you never tell anybody, like, hey, I have no clue what I'm doing, right? You just give it a try. But we had a very successful opening. And so we have I think it was 700 meals day one. And we didn't have a system. And so we're working out of a cage where all our ingredients are. And so I think there was 5 or 6 of us all in one long table, and everything's all over the place. There was no communication. There was no procedure. So I'm grabbing the seasonings, I'm seasoning the meat, and then I put it over there, and then everybody's like, "Where's this part? Where's this? Where's the knives? Where's?" And it was just complete chaos in a table, and nobody could find anything. Everybody was in each other's way.
And mind you, we're in a shared kitchen,
Yeah.
right? So there's these big tables, and that's basically your station. And depending on how big your production team is, you either have one or two, maybe three. But it's a big space. So there's at least another 3 or 4 businesses working at the same time as you. And there's certain things that we share, right? So we're here having a tornado going on, and people are looking like, oh my God, what are these guys doing? Like, these are the people that are going to come rent this space with us. And it can be pretty intimidating at first for somebody that is a first timer in this. And that was probably a first couple weeks for us until
Yeah, most of the businesses ran a single product. So, right, if you're doing empanadas, it would just be different flavored empanadas. But we were building when we first started, I think we had like 10 or 12 different meals. And that was mistake number one.
Yeah.
Meal prep companies, unless you have a space like a Subway type of system where all the meats are cooked there and you can make the bowl right on the spot, pre-making meals and pre-packaging meals was a shit show.
It's very time consuming.
It was very time consuming. The portions had to be right. So going back to knowing your numbers, we had to create an Excel sheet that would calculate the amount of food we needed, because we had to pre-buy all the food and try to get it to the exact, right? If we overdid it, we were overspending, and we would have all this extra waste. But the problem that we continued to run into at the beginning was we were short. And so once again, this process, the way it happens is, or actually I'll let you explain it. I think you could probably explain the process of what it was like from prepping the food to cooling the food
so
to
I'll actually
packaging.
take it a step back first. There was an orders had to come in, right? We gave them a deadline, and that gave us a few hours or one day to input all the numbers into the Excel sheet, which after that Excel sheet, it gave us exactly how much we needed of each amount. So if there was 100 orders, and remember, we have 10 items on the menu, it tells me exactly how many pounds of raw material, raw chicken I need, beef. So then from here, I go out to the store, get everything. Day one, which was Saturday, is we do all our prep work. So we chop all the veggies, we cook all the rice, we cook all the meats. Then all of that has to get cooled. So for example, if we're grilling 40 pounds of chicken, then it all needs to be grilled, it all needs to be chopped, it all needs to be placed in a big pan sheet, put into a rack. It needs to reach a certain temperature. So the cooking temp for chicken is 165. We have to make sure that that's that temp. Then place it in the rack. You can't place it in the fridge until it hits at least 141 degrees. Then you have to place it in the fridge, and then it has to reach a certain temperature when it's out. So there's this whole process. Now, when it comes to making 700 meals, you're talking at least 5 to 10 racks, right? And everything has to be cooled. Then the second day, which is Sunday morning, we start pulling everything out, chopping things if they didn't get chopped. Then we start our assembly lines, and it's meal by meal. Then we do the packaging, count, we bag them, order by order, then they get delivered. So it's a 2-day, technically 3-day processing, including the grocery.
And there were full days, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
we would go in at 6 o'clock?
6 a.m. we wouldn't get home
till
till
4 every day.
Some days we were there
well,
long.
The second day was very long.
Yeah.
It was 6 to 4 the first day of prepping.
Mm-hmm.
And then same thing the next day, but then the delivery drivers, which it was us at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd be coming home at 7, 8 o'clock, right? And obviously when everybody starts asking you, like, do you deliver to Santa Cruz? You're like, yeah, I deliver to Santa Cruz. I deliver to Salinas. I deliver to San Jose. So we were going all over the place.
Yeah, I was going all the way. I would do the Salinas route. Leave some in Prudendale, leave some in Salinas, drive all the way to Soledad, and then you would take the Santa Cruz and some Watsonville. So there was days where we were back at 8 or 9 p.m. just beat
Yeah.
than to find out that somebody messages like, hey, I got the wrong meal. Guys, I am not joking when I say I had nightmares. Even after this Excel sheet that Christian created, I had nightmares that I would mess up an order or that I was missing ingredients. There was so many times where it was like 3 a.m. and I was like, shit, I forgot the green beans. And I would have to wake up earlier, go to Foodmex because it was the only store that was open, and pray that they had green beans. Or if they didn't, then go to another store and hope that I made it back in time by the time that my team got there and we started cooking. It was crazy. It got to the point where it was just, I think, the lack of system in my kitchen, the lack of passing on responsibilities to other people. Because for me, the kitchen's very easy. I can do things with my eyes closed, but I would take on that responsibility because it was like, oh no, I'll just do it because I can do it faster. Was I being efficient? No, not at all. So I should have passed on the responsibility to my teammates to be more efficient. And that was one of also my biggest mistakes that I didn't do, is I just kept on loading responsibilities onto myself and then forgetting things. And then mistakes started or continued to happen. And
yeah, it got pretty chaotic. I think communication wasn't there. Well, because at first we were delivering on Sundays, and then we would deliver on Thursdays as well. So we had 2 delivery days, right? So we did this process twice in a week. After having chaos for quite a few months, we're like, you know what? We're only going to do Sundays. And so we changed the delivery to only once a week, which helped a lot. It just meant that now we're getting 700 or 1,000 meals in a weekend. And that was a lot to cook. And being short was a problem because when we would go through this entire, basically 20-hour process and you're short 2 pounds of meat, well, guess what? Now we have to go back to the store once all the meals were packaged, make up the difference, cook the food, cool it, which takes a couple hours, and then package it. And meanwhile, there's all these employees waiting for us. So there goes the payroll of this employee, this employee, this employee, this employee.
And the kitchen equipment.
And we were getting charged for the kitchen. So I remember adding up mistakes of being short. And it was always like every month it was like $2,000-$3,000. And so we're talking at this point, it was like maybe $800 to $1,200 of rent for what we were using at the beginning. But with the mistakes, our rent was like $3,000 to $4,000. And obviously that when you do that multiple times in a month, right, multiply a loss of $3,000-$4,000 times 6 months, well, you just lost $24,000, right? And so cash flow starts to go down, panic starts to hit, and then it becomes this fight of, you didn't do this, I didn't do this, and it was just going back and forth, and that was really stressful. We both worked in the restaurant industry before, so we understood what process was on the front end of a restaurant. No. I've never worked in a kitchen though, so I didn't know what ordering looked like. Right, it was us learning how to deal with vendors, and I'm not the best person to do that, so I allowed you to do that, which was good. I think you're a lot better with people first time. I'm like, I need this, I need that, and they were like, F you. But it was a tough thing, right? So I think another lesson, we talked about knowing your numbers. Obviously, when COVID hit, we went downhill, right? We were really tight on money. We had overspended. Just not knowing how to manage money at that time, and even to this day, it's still very hard to do, right? It's learning how to make a budget. It's learning how to project. But we just overspent. We were having so many problems because we were growing at a fast rate that we started adding more things, right? We started figuring out, okay, how can we make this process faster? We got a food processor, which really speed up the rate that we would cut vegetables. That cut down a lot of our time. We started mixing the meat in the big blender, right?
Yeah.
In that big mixer. That really helped us break down the ground beef and the ground turkey. So it was a good.
We started doing the pound options too,
Right.
the bulk options, and those were easier, right? You're
Yeah.
just cooking pounds of meat.
Um, but the problem that happened when we ran out of cash was we just didn't have access to other cash, right? We couldn't get a loan.
Yeah.
The banks were not. We went to a lot of banks. The people that we went to that were supposed to help us.
Oh yeah.
We're not gonna mention names that were supposed to help us fund the bit or get the loan. Forgot to submit the paperwork. Lost the paperwork.
Yeah.
And it was just this thing of like, oh yeah, come next week. I'm gonna help you out. Out for a week. Out for 2 weeks. Out for 3 weeks. Nowhere to be found. So these programs or assistance that we quote unquote had didn't really exist. Our credit scores were a mess. We had gotten into a car accident like a year before. We got in all kinds of debt. We didn't have health insurance at the time.
And then we got that storefront too. That was an
Yeah.
additional
But our
expense.
credit scores were not good at that time, so we didn't have access to cash. All our cards were maxed out, and so we had no option but to close. But yes, we did. In the process of fixing all these problems, because we were starting to. One of the problems that we solved by being short, we're like, let's just overmake. I was like, I would much rather have extra 20 meals
to sell.
to sell because it's easier to say, hey, I have 10 meals left. Who wants them? Than to say, hey, I need to run to the store and give me 2 more hours before I get there.
Yeah.
So we came up with that solution, and then we're like, well, what if we have a storefront? Once again, we couldn't get access to any leases because we didn't have really any financials, I guess, or any way to get those loans, or at that time we didn't know how to handle a lease or how to go talk to a person. And this was a big fear of mine. I didn't really know how to get to that process. Once again, back to the ask questions. If I would have just called them and asked the question, I'm sure we could have found a location. We were realistically trying to find a place with our own kitchen, but there was no restaurant available. So we ended up going to the Discount Mall, which is one of those big malls with a bunch of little shops. And we got a place. It was like this size of this room. It was probably like 20 feet by like 12 feet wide. And it was just big enough for fridges to fit and a desk to fit. And
some apparel.
Yeah. And so we got this place. I think we were paying like $1,200. It was a ripoff. It was like 300 square feet. It was like $4 a square foot.
Yeah, it was expensive. And the interesting part is that, this was our first place. So we wanted to make the best out of the space that we had. And I mean, I'm sure everybody here in town knows what Discount Mall looks like. You walk in, and the way that they close or section off their businesses is either by a big blanket or curtain or just plastic. And when we told the landlord we wanted to put walls up, they were like, what? No, like just hang another curtain. And we're like, we're trying to make your space look better. And I remember Chilango went in and he had already put probably like a 4-foot wall.
No, he did a full one.
Oh yeah, he had the full one, and we had to cut that thing in half. And you were pissed, and I was pissed because I was the one having to go communicate with this person that doesn't speak English, right? They're Asian, and I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And we ended up putting the racks so you could still see through, but it was such a pain. And then we ran into the problem of we took 40 meals, and I get back to the kitchen. You're like, hey, Dre, you got to cook some more. We only have like 10 left. And it's like, fuck, what? Like, I just let go of my stuff, and now I have to go back and do everything again. Yeah. So there was a lot of going back and forth.
Yeah.
And
dealing with the Asian lady, it was pretty funny because she was she was the one that was always there. Her husband kind of just stood outside
Smoked.
and monitored the place. But she had originally told me that I could put up the wall. And what happened was that all the other people that owned the businesses around didn't like the wall because they couldn't peek inside.
Yeah.
And so their
Bottom line.
rule was that I think they created all these lies. It was the most interesting thing. They thought at first that we were selling drugs or we were selling some
Yeah.
type of cannabis product. And we're
Then
like,
they
"No,
thought
we're
we didn't
selling
have our
this."
license.
Then they went into the city and said that we didn't have a license, which we found out was the other food vendor that was in there
Yeah.
because they sold seafood. We sold meal preps. Apparently, we took their customers. But it was just every time we try to make the place better, I think it was a lot of, I guess you can call it jealousy, but I don't know. And I spoke about this the other day, and we talked about the crabs in a bucket,
Mm-hmm.
right? I posted it today. But it was one of those places where they didn't want you to do better than what they were all doing. A lot of them were unwilling to spend money on the place to make it look better. So that was the standard for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And anybody above that was...
anything above that, we're going to bring them down.
Yeah.
And they tried multiple times. So this lady comes in and tells us that we need to take the wall down. I'm like, there's no way. I am pissed at this lady. I'm like, there's no way I'm taking this wall down. And so then we got into negotiation. I was like, I will cut it in half. I'll put some windows on it, right? And they were like, it has to be clear. We had to be able to peek in. And realistically, like, we had a lot of product in there and we had food. And I'm like, I don't trust that when I leave, someone's going to be able to just walk in and take whatever they want,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a lot of money in there. And so we ended up building this frame to put a door. And finally, we all, came into an agreement, and that was good. But it was just interesting to see because we would get these looks from all the other vendors, right? Because what happened here was most of them, they just sit there and they don't mark it out,
Yeah.
right? So they just sit there and wait for people to walk in. And obviously the discount mall is no longer what it used to be
Years
back
ago.
in the days,
Mhm.
right? Back in the days, it was a spot to go to, right? There was all these vendors and you go in there. So people are living in ancient times, still waiting for customers to show up. It's not the same place. Meanwhile, these new kids show up and it was just busy. People kept walking in, right? We had a community of people that we had already been selling to.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody felt as if we took all their customers. And so everybody was upset at us. And it was just uncomfortable because we would get all these looks. People would walk in, peek, and just give us a
No
dirty
smile,
look.
no greet, just like, oh, there they are. And
Yeah. But, that solved a lot of problems, obviously. But then that meant we had to hire another employee or multiple employees to manage that. Payroll started going up. We started dealing with kitchen problems when, everybody felt like they were helping us. Like everybody was doing us a favor. And this is a difficult part about the meal prep business, that unless you have a stable job that you could say, I can hire you for 40 hours or at least 20 hours, right? We were getting everybody's off time. So if we had a chef who worked at 2 other restaurants, and so on his off time, he would come and quote unquote help us out. And I was like, you're not helping us out.
You're
I mean,
getting paid.
you're getting paid. It's a job, right? But they didn't take it very serious. And obviously, we weren't probably the best leaders or the best. We didn't really know how to manage people. And to this day, it's still very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But we've learned along the way how to do it a little better. But yeah, everybody felt like they were helping us, like they were doing us a favor. And I was like, there's a transaction happening here.
Mm-hmm.
You're working and you're getting paid. You're not working and then we're just saying thank you, right? So that was very difficult to find. I don't want to say quality employees, but employees that were committed to,
and
to
I
what we
think
were doing.
employees in general, I think everybody's heard this at least once. Don't hire your family or your friends. And I 100% agree with that, right? The first round of people that were part of our teammates were family and were friends. And it's great until it's not, right? And then there's that awkwardness of, okay, are we still friends? Are we good? Or are you going to pay me for the last 2 days that I told you I was going to show up and I didn't? Like, how do you have those conversations? So I think that that was definitely a big one for us, is learning how to manage people. And I'm happy that we had that experience, because it helped us now with this business. But it was definitely interesting, and hard as well. I don't know how people in the food industry do it. There's people that work 3 jobs, and I'm like, how, right? So like you said, if you don't have a set work schedule, then nobody's going to want to commit to, oh, I'm only going to work 3 hours today, or, oh, today I can only guarantee you 8 hours. And I think that was also one of our biggest issues, is that we didn't have that set hours. And that also affected the amount of people that we had on board with us willing to help, because they would work great for a month, and then I was like, okay, well, now we don't know how many hours we can give you.
Yeah.
And most of them were kids too.
Yeah,
I remember we had that 15-year-old, 16-year-old working with us.
Yeah, he was good though.
Yeah.
He was the hardest working one out of all of them. I forget his name.
Eric.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was good. Eric, if you're out there,
Thank
you're
you.
probably 19, 20 right now. I'm sure you're crushing it, because you were crushing it back then. Yeah, but that was hard. Managing employees were hard. And I think obviously level of pay, level of employee, level of care, I guess, or importance. We're talking about entry-level employees or entry-level pay. And so obviously, there's not a lot of attention to it. So, I can show up or I don't have to show up type of deal. It was like side money for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal was to get it up and running. And it was like this race of like, we need to get to the point where we're cooking every single day. And having the storefront got us there. We got it to the point where we had someone who was working at least 4 hours every day.
Yeah.
And that did help. But it was also like just this person had so many other issues, and they would just miss on the day of. So now we're jumping on. But yeah, it was stressful. Employees were stressful at that time. We didn't know how to manage. We didn't know how to create systems.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know how to create procedures. We never had a rule book or expectations of what was expected.
I started many.
We did start
that I
them.
did not finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those were some big eye openers for us. But once again, we found a lot of positives out of it. I think I learned to use Excel very well. I learned how to build a website. I learned how to take photographs. I learned how to take videos. I learned how to market. I learned how to create offers. These are all skills that are needed that now I use, that have helped me get a little higher, right? And whatever this business teaches me, whether it works or whether it doesn't in the future, this is going to teach me for the next level that I plan to go into. This business now is teaching me that I need to work on my communication. I need to work on delegating. I need to work on, not overthrowing roles at myself. And now I need to work on learning how to be a dad, a business owner, an employee, a partner, right? And so it requires a higher level of myself. And this is what we've been learning along the way with business, that yes, it's never the same day. It's not like I don't know what this week is going to look like. I have it planned out, but it could change day to day, right? It's not like a 9-to-5 job that you look 5 days out, 30 days out, and you already know what you're going to do. I just pack bags and that's it. Yeah. Or I stock the racks and that's about it. And it's difficult. It's very difficult to do, but I wouldn't change it, and I couldn't see myself just following orders on a day-to-day basis. Even when I was an employee, I never just did the bare minimum. I was always finding ways to improve the business, and and add value to the business. And this was difficult. This is one thing that I've learned at a very young age, that I'm very strong opinionated. So when I see something, I talk about it, and I usually I love to fix problems. I'm a problem solver, and I'm always finding ways to fix things, right? And once again, a double-edged sword. When I was an employee, I would always be the one that would go to the employer and be like, you should probably fix this, or you should change it, you should do it this way. The first, when I was in New York, the first restaurant that I work at, the guy didn't like it. We got into an altercation, and I was a bar back for his bar, and there was this guy who would come in every single day, and he would buy a 30-pack of Coors Light at the bar. He would sit there for like 6-7 hours. New Yorkers are drinkers. And he would charge them for every single Coors Light, like $7 a Coors Light. And I'm like, this guy has got a $200 tab every single time, $200 to $300 tab. This guy would not give him a beer. He would give him like one beer every like 2 weeks. And eventually the customer left, and I was like, you gotta give them a little more, right? They're coming here. We're looking for lifelong customers. Like, you gotta. And obviously he didn't like that, And then me and him kind of started bumping heads, and I was like, all right, I'm out. But, it's at the other place that I was at, the next restaurant, same thing. It was like this high-end restaurant, and they were like the types of plates that you weren't able to stack plates, so you would have to carry all the plates in your arm when you were picking them up. So I'd be the guy walking around
shaking.
I would be walking around this really nice restaurant, right? It was like a waterfront restaurant. You'd have like the presidents who visit. You'd have like celebrities who visit. And I'm the bar back walking around with plates shaking. Oh my God, it was so uptight place. And I was like, I'm done. I called out of that place very quickly. The following place, though, which was a very good experience, I worked for two guys, Dominic and JD, at the Hudson Social. Also a waterfront restaurant, but this place was more about being social. It was a drinking place. There was an outdoor patio, first floor, second floor, and these guys were really cool. I appreciate everything that they did for me. They took me in. The chef didn't like me. He put me in the dishwasher position the first day that I showed up. He was just a dick to me. And he was the manager at the time. And I remember the owner comes in like on day 2, and he's like, what is this guy doing in the dishwasher? Dishwashing. He's like, you should put him up front. And he kind of gave him the look, and so they moved me as a busser. And I remember the waiters at the time. Some of them helped me out, figured out how to bus and stuff like that. Taught me the system there, and then they moved me up to a waiter. Then they moved me up to, because I was always trying to figure out ways to do more things, right? I was like, oh, I'll do the marketing for you guys. I'll take the photos. I'll take photos of the food. They didn't have much of that. That's when Instagram was coming out. Instagram came out in 2012, and around that time, that's when I was there. So I started using Instagram, started figuring out how to take photos. They loved it, continued to do that, and then I was like, we should do parties. I remember all the customers would go to this restaurant all day, and then around like 10 o'clock at night, they would go to the next town over because there was music. We had a beautiful space with a lot of space. And I was like, why don't we just bring the party here? Like, why are we allowing customers to go somewhere else? And we should just bring the party here. So they bring the party here, and then this place just gets popping all of a sudden. Then I was like, why don't we do theme parties? Let's do the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, all that. We did that. I was like, we should bring a DJ in. And then this place just turned into this party place. And it was a lot of fun. And then we would cater the upstairs. So we would have private parties like that. And, they just allowed me to try new things.
And to run it your way.
not
Well, not
realistically
run,
run it my
but to
way,
experiment.
but to experiment. They were open to ideas, and it was like a collaboration. I would sit with JD. JD was a numbers guy, and he would show me Excel. He would show me the books on the back end, and he was always eager to teach. And he told me about his crazy times in the in Wall Street, and Dominic. He was like a father figure to me at that point too. And I became really close to these two guys, and they just taught me a lot in the 2 years that I was there. And I'm very thankful that I got that experience there. And coming back home, having all that pre-knowledge, that's what just gave me that fire to say, you know what, I'm going to try it myself too. But I've always wanted to try things. And I think that's one thing that you've learned along the way, being around me, is that I'm not afraid to try. Definitely not afraid to try. The more that you do it, the more that you learn. The more that you fail, the more that you learn. And a lot of the times, even though we don't have the answers are very easy to find.
Yeah.
Like, I remember finding a business license. I see so many businesses here that don't legalize their business, right? Because they think it's this huge process, especially like a sole proprietor is go to the IRS, sole proprietor,
pay.
You don't even have to pay for a sole proprietor just to get a tax ID, right? You just put in your information, put your social, and it's like, boom, you have a business. Yeah. Now you can legally sell. LLCs are pretty straightforward. Just same document, different document, go to the city, get a fictitious name, and that's it. It's like set. 3 steps. You just have to talk to people. And if you don't know the answer, then you tell them, okay, where do I go next? Yeah. And that's it, right? All the other stuff is obviously hard, but starting up a business is super, super simple. Like, you can do it in 2 days, right? If you have a product to sell, you have the attention. I mean, it's go time. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it's long hours. But once again, I wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, that was definitely the foundation for me. Obviously, there was a lot of times where I was just like, fuck this, I'm out. I don't want this, right? And again, the passion wasn't there, but it taught me so much. I learned so much about cooking. I learned how to work with people. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to be behind a camera. Like, you would literally follow me around and be like, okay, Dre, you ready? Like, go. And I'd be like sweating, almost in tears, because either I had made a mistake or something had gone wrong. And I was like, okay, well, today we're making la 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 la, like, and that was very stressful. But now, years later, it's what helps me just be on the spot and be able to talk, and has gotten me so comfortable to sit behind a camera and make it feel more natural and less forced. And without every mistake that we did, we wouldn't have learned so much. Yeah. And that's another lesson, right? Like, every failure is a lesson in itself, and you need to fail in order to learn. And you might not just fail once, it might be a couple, but eventually you're going to learn something out of it. And yeah, it's interesting that a lot of the time when we talk about meal preps and we talk about easy preps, and we'll go on Instagram and see like what other companies are out there, and we're like, fuck, we would kill it if we started it. Yeah. And especially when after I had Luca, Christian was here at the gym, right? This was about a month after Luca was born. And 1, I wanted to make some cash. But 2, I also just wanted to do something and feel like I was contributing to our income. And I still had a couple clients that were in need. So I had about 2 clients, and then I easily had 10. And I got to the point where I needed a helper because I couldn't deliver, or I couldn't do all the work, right? And I mean, I had a newborn. So I remember doing this for a couple months, and I got a second fridge at the house just to place meals because our house was pretty small. And one day I was just like, oh my God, we're back doing this again, because we were already thinking of like reopening the company, because we had a big following, a big community, and we knew that if we said we're going to go in, we're going to do it all over again. And I was like, wait, do I really want to? Like, the money's great, but is it worth everything else?
Yeah.
And then having the conversation again of, we have all these ideas, but we have our main goal. And in a sense, those are distractions, right? So we have to 100% focus on our main goal because it's where we're at now. And maybe in the future,
Yeah.
once we're settled and once we have more time, we
Yeah.
can branch off. But then there's no time for half-assing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs our 100% focus. But we always get these little conversations of,
Always.
well, Christian's, yes, very impulsive, but I'm also very spontaneous. It excites me to be like, okay, he gets this idea and I'm like, okay, like, let's go. So I think that's something that I've learned is I like when you get those ideas because then it gives me like not inspiration, that's not the word that I'm talking about, but just like this little fire, like, oh, okay, here we go, here's something new. And it's been obviously a wild ride, but also just a cool experience. Yeah. I mean, we don't know what is going to happen in the next 10 years, but
yeah,
that excites me, that I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, right? I don't have, it could be this, it could be that, it could be all of it. Like, it's up to us. And then that's the exciting part about it is that anybody can decide what their future looks like. You just have to be willing to dream and obviously willing to do the work as well. Like, 100%, that's never not going to be in the picture. But if you don't like where you're at, if you're unhappy, there's something you need to do about it. And it falls back on us.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very good. So, and if anybody has any questions or any of you want to get into the food industry business and you need help, like I'm all open. Like I'm an open book. I will tell you everything. And if somebody even wants to take over the Easy Preps, we were selling it at a point. We still have everything. We have all the systems in place. I have all the formulas. If somebody was to want to take it over, we have the community of people, right, that will purchase the meals. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be in the food business, but I would love to advise on it, or I would love to sell you the system so that you can start and get it going.
Because you will
it's good money. It was good money, right? Our initial goal was to hire employees. I know that's not the goal for everybody. Like if you were owner operator and it was just you and your partner or you and your family, mm-hmm. there was good money involved, right? $30,000 a month of revenue is a good amount of money, and if you're not dumping it out to other employees and you're keeping it to yourself, you would keep a good amount. But to summarize some of the lessons, here are my top 5 lessons that I learned. The top lessons that I learned from Easy Preps, number 1 was don't do something that you don't like out of the gate. Just don't do it. Mm-hmm. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. Number 2 was if you fail, continue to allow your passion to lead you in the direction. So in my example, I love to help people, and I wanted to go into the food industry to create a solution to this problem. It didn't work out the way I wanted to, but I still continued in the fitness industry, and I still continue to help people by, helping them with fitness and nutrition. So maybe it wasn't prepping the food, maybe it was prepping the mindset of the people so that they can go ahead and prep the food themselves. Mm-hmm. Number 3 for me was everything takes longer than expected. We wanted to grow so fast. And even with Envision, I remember like month 3, we're like, we're going to open another one right now. And we're like, things just take a long time. This new location that we opened, it's taken us like an extra 3 weeks that we expected. Not as much. But, obviously a month more does add some time to it. So whatever you expect it's going to take, it's probably going to take longer than that. Mm-hmm. Number 4 for me is like you need to fix your financials. So your credit score needs to get fixed, right? Otherwise, you don't have access to credit cards or you don't have access to a bank, which, it's going to come in handy at some point. Yeah. And then number 5 is going to be learning how to build systems and procedures. Without a system, you're all over the place, and it becomes really difficult. To this day, we're still working on bettering our systems on a day-to-day basis. And it's just continuing to refine them. We've hired multiple people to help us that have been there and have done it multiple times, and that helps a lot. But a big reminder is you're not going to be able to do it all yourself. It's going to take a team to move things forward. But those are my 5.
Yeah, mine are very similar. So my first one is failures equal lessons, right? If you don't fail, you're not going to learn. My second one is ask for help. 2 minds work better than one. If you don't share your ideas or your concerns, you're not going to get any feedback. If you can find a mentor, get as much help as you can. Number 3, know every part of your business. So that includes your financials, your back end, marketing, everything. If you are in charge of it, if you are have a partner, both of you need to know both ends of your business, because if something happens to the other one and you're left to run the business on your own and you don't know how to run it, then what do you do? Does your business fail because you didn't know that? So know every part of your business. Number 4, definitely systems and procedures. Whether it's for you, it's just you as an employee or running your business, you're going to be more efficient, or whether you're trying to grow your company, right? When you have employees and you don't have a procedure, how are you going to teach them? How are you going to be efficient? How are you going to continue to get those sales? You need to have systems and procedures in place. And then the most important one, don't sign up to something that you don't like, that you're not passionate about. It's not worth it. Yeah. Learn to say no and learn to do the things that you really want to do.
Boom. Well, there you have it. If you have any questions, send us a message. Like I said, I'd be happy to share any type of knowledge when it comes to food, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to how to start a business. And if we don't have the answer, I'm sure we can point you in the right direction to the next person that can help you out. But our goal is to continue to provide value to all of you, to encourage you, to inspire you, to take chances, to take risks, and to realize that if we stay together, we can move forward this community. So thank you all for listening.
Until next.
Boom.